In the HBO documentary The Inventor Out for Blood, Alex Gibney proves how the medical industry and the general public as a whole were susceptible to the lies on the part of the company Theranos, led by Elizabeth Holmes, because of the narrative of a life-changing device that Holmes presented.
There's no shortcut to really hard work. And we learned so much more from our failures than we did from our successes. We codenamed our product the Edison because we assumed we'd have to fail 10,000 times to get it to work the 10,000th and first. And we did.
She ties herself to the famous inventor and American hero Thomas Edison. In this way, she shields herself from criticism through his ethos. She compares her failure to his and even names her device the Edison. In an attempt to seem intelligent in an interview, Holmes discusses her invention and uses words very similar to those of Edison. Gibney then puts the actual words of Edison on the screen to point out her lack of individuality and her attempt to use the credentials of another instead of her own.
What does it mean to invent something? It could be an act of creation or an act of deception. The world's greatest inventor did both. We think of Thomas Edison as the inventor of the phonograph, the electric light bulb, and the way we look at the world. But Edison's greatest invention may have been himself. The first celebrity businessman, Edison's secret was knowing how to tell a good story in which he cast himself as the main character. The Wizard of Menlo Park, a man who could conjure anything in his laboratory. But he often promised far more than he could deliver. In 1878, the New York Sun printed a claim by Edison that he had solved the mystery of the incandescent light bulb. But it wasn't true. His filaments kept melting. When reporters and investors asked for demonstrations, he faked them. To keep journalists sympathetic, he gave them stock in his company. For 4 years, he pretended his invention was good to go, even while he scrambled to make it work. Then, just before his money and credit ran out, he solved the problem of how to keep the lights on. He was the first to practice the Silicon Valley art of fake it till you make it.
Even after proving that Holmes was just a mindless copy of Edison, Gibney exposed how Edison himself was not the hero that society had built him up to be. By referencing how creation and deception were the two largest parts of Edison's rise to fame, Gibney shows how Holmes' admiration for the inventor caused her to use deception and be unwilling to admit defeat. Holmes modeled Edison for praise from society. However, Gibney exposes how Edison's greatest invention was himself. He built himself up to be the Wizard of Menlo Park, all while paying off journalists and faking demonstrations to hide that he did not actually have the answers to the mystery of the light bulb. The Silicon Valley attitude of fake it till you make it had come from Edison. Sadly for Elizabeth, she was able to model Edison's personality all the way up to a $10 billion company, but was never able to deliver the actual invention like Edison did.
More than 100 years after Edison's first movies, Elizabeth Holmes modeled her own ambitious career after the great American inventor, with a magical machine named after the man himself.
In order to model the life of Holmes, Gibney builds Edison up just to tear him down. This parallels the film's structure, as it began with Holmes climbing to fame and ended with their company being worth less than nothing. Edison is portrayed at first as a great American inventor, and then Gibney shows him as a manipulative, fame-hungry entrepreneur. Similarly, Holmes is presented as a young female genius with the plan to revolutionize the medical field, and then she is revealed to be a lying and heartless shell of a person. Gibney blends their eyes together in the final moments of the scene in order to show how their personalities mirror each other.
It was obviously such an incredible story. The 19-year-old, the dropout, a woman creating this $9 billion innovative company.
Their fake claims were never shown through their deceitful eyes, as they made appearances in the most prestigious media of their time.
Okay, this person, plays this role of, wanting to make healthcare more accessible, of really, trying to leverage innovative new technologies to solve this huge problem that we have in healthcare. But it's all a show.
I grew up spending summers and the holidays with my uncle. I remember how much I loved him.
I loved him so much. He was fine.
He was was diagnosed one day with skin cancer, and then actually it was he has pretty.
In order to support the idea that the business of Silicon Valley is compiled of lies and fancy rhetoric, Gibney compiles the many occasions where Holmes relays her story in order to distract both the public and her investors from what Theranos was lacking in facts. In order to be consistent with the analogy of Edison and Holmes, this scene was formatted in the old-fashioned film format that was previously used with the Edison scenes. The format reminds the viewer that Holmes's tactics of deceit were not her own, and she frequently modeled herself as Edison to escape criticism.
Cancer and actually much, and all of a sudden it was brain cancer, and then he was going and I never got to think about it. So I look at it in the context of some of the renewable solutions that we already have, and in the context of empowerment, because of what we show, access to those, one person doesn't have to go through.
Holmes tricked the public with her heart-wrenching story of losing her uncle too soon to cancer. She claims that this loss was the inspiration for her company, and she famously states numerous times that she hopes to create a world where no one has to say goodbye too soon. Gibney shows how many of her Theranos tests actually put cancer patients and anyone else who took them in serious danger. And he continued to find flaws in Holmes' act. By forcing the viewer to see how many times she replicated her exact words and emotions, she becomes heartless in the eyes of the viewer. Gibney wanted to show how everything, even this heartfelt story from Holmes, was a rehearsed act in an attempt to gain further success. Holmes is mechanical and cold, and should not, in the eyes of Gibney, be perceived as anything else. It is overwhelming to see both the video and audio of Holmes recanting her story over 100 times. Gibney knows that Holmes was trying to induce pathos in her audience, but in order to take the blinders off of the general public, he had to expose her fake emotions and robotic manner in achieving success.